We are stepping out of the airlock and we are opening up the flap on the beautiful bag of wonderful missives that we have received from you as we step into the blessed year of our Lord 2023.
Whew,
And let's
it's the
start.
future.
Let's start with John and Brett. John and Brett ask, do we get Doom before Fantastic Four, like a post-credit in Quantumania or something else? Who should they cast? Please, you and Rosie vamp on the Good Doctor. Rosie, this is an interesting question.
I mean, it's our
I
dream.
have thoughts. Yes.
Oh, so many thoughts. I truly do believe that there was a version of Wakanda Forever that would have ended with a Doctor Doom post-credit scene. I believe that would have fit. I believe it makes sense with Namor, with the connections to Wakanda and, the now known as Talakan. So I do believe that we will see Doctor Doom before we meet the Fantastic Four. He's one of Marvel's most incredible villains, and Marvel Studios has never been able to make a movie with him in because of the licensing to Fox. So I think that's a character they can't get wrong and that they know could be their kind of next level Thanos, this kind of overarching God Emperor Doom. He can be the ally who turns into a villain. He can be your average sort of small level villain that you don't see coming that becomes this huge omnipotent kind of foe. I would love to see him in Quantumania. Do I think it's going to be that soon? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think we see him proper in Quantumania. I would not be shocked if there's a moment when Kang is doing the expo dump and telling you who he is, telling Scott and everybody who he is and how he came to be. If there is not like a wall of computer monitors or something, in Kang's base. And you see as he's telling Scott all the versions of himself that have existed throughout time.
Yeah.
If in one of those screens there is not a mask of Doctor Doom.
Yeah,
I would not be totally shocked if that happened. And I think that's the way they do it.
I
in
think
this
it's
kind of quick,
seeding.
because obviously casting, we don't know. I don't know how, and I feel like, who knows? They're so good at keeping this shit quiet. But I also feel like if they had cast Doom by now, there would be something more than the kind of, Giancarlo Esposito rumors and the Adam Driver rumors that are kind of out there. Like, we'd probably hear some pretty loud whispers. So in lieu of having an actual cameo guest spot where you see him and don't hear his voice or hear somebody's voice that they've cast but we haven't had the news yet, I think that you'll just get a very, very, very small clue to the existence of Doom in the form of a picture of his armor in the context of all these other versions of Kang that have existed throughout the multiverse and throughout time.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if you think about how they introduced, Thanos in the original MCU. You have that incredible Damien Poitier ending, but he doesn't say anything. And then when they wanted to, they could recast him. I still think it was a mistake, even though I love Josh Brolin. But, it would be easy for them to do a mask. You don't see who's behind it. You can get an implication and then you can reveal. This actually does lead to one of... So they also wanted to know who would cast, right? This leads to one of my favorite things that I've been thinking about a lot. William Jackson Harper from The Good Place and Midsommar. He got cast for. A lot of people were like, oh, maybe he's going to play Reed. I would love that casting. It's delightful. I think he's going to play Nathaniel Richards. I think he's going to be... Yeah, I think that they're going to go young for the Fantastic Four. My original fan casting that I did a couple of years ago on Nerdist was them older. It was like Keanu Reeves and all these different kinds of people as older versions because I like that story. But I think this is their next generation of heroes. I think they're going to go young. So I think William Jackson Harper is going to play Nathaniel, who obviously then you've got Kang being the descendant, and that sets up Black Reed, which we kind of all thought was going to be the route that they go. And I think that could be so cool because then you get to see these different generations.
And just to quick download for those not versed in the history of Kang and Reed and the Fantastic Four and the Marvel Universe, Nathaniel Richards is a descendant of Reed Richards from the 30th century who bored with the completely utopic and peaceful existence of the 30th century, decides to travel through time where he can get into some trouble. He finds a time machine. He goes back to ancient Egypt and becomes, the predecessor of the person who then becomes Kang, starting the Kang journey, basically. So if that is correct, do they cheat, kind of, and do Jonathan Majors, Reed Richards? Like,
I think it's one of the most interesting questions.
I think that's on the table.
I think it's on the table. I'm interested. Me and my friend James, we have a lot of Fantastic Four thoughts. My wonderful friend James, and we have some fan castings that we do for our own fun. But one of the ones that really stuck with me for Doom that I think about a lot, that I think could work really well with this is and it's unexpected because he's not a looming tall figure, but he's very serious, and I think he'd be very good. I think you could do a great John David Washington Doom. Ooh. And I like the idea of having this Fantastic Four and Kang kind of storyline become this unexpected space for all these incredible black actors in the MCU, especially because Kang is not, I love Kang, but he's not particularly like well-known character. And Jonathan Majors has already brought so much gravitas and kind of texture and weirdness to that role. So I'm expecting them to kind of follow on and do unexpected casting. But yeah, I love thinking about who they're going to cast as Doctor Doom. My original fan cast that I did was Keanu as an older Reed Richards who'd been stuck in the negative zone, and then young Doctor Doom, who is going to be Adam Driver, who now isn't really that young. But I do think Doom Adam Driver is that's a really interesting casting just because of how great he was as Kylo Ren. He brought so much weird, strange emotion to that I think Doom has. Obviously, Mads Mikkelsen, that's like the iconic Doom casting that I think a lot of people kind of immediately jump to their heads. Do you have any... Oh,
I like all of those. I like the Giancarlo Esposito kind of like rumor that is out there. Let me ask you this, because this is something I've been thinking about. Kang's coming first, right? Before any of the Fantastic Four, before Doctor Doom, etc. I've been wondering about the relationship between Kang and Doom. Like, does Kang, we understand that Kang has been, at least the Kang that we met in Loki, existed to kind of keep the multiverse pruned and kind of streamlined in order to keep the rise of various versions, more warlike versions of himself, from coming to the fore. I've been wondering if along those lines, Kang is not like in this kind of multiversal struggle against Doom as well. Like he's trying, I wonder if he's not trying to keep Doom from showing up.
I think that's a really interesting take, and I wish I could remember. For the life of me, I do not remember whether this was my close friend, somebody who DM'd me, something I read online. I saw an absolutely wild theory that leans into that, which is like the MCU as we know it is basically God Emperor Doom's version of the Marvel Universe that he's been controlling. And then
mindfuck.
It would be so crazy, right? And then you have the idea of Kang basically trying to undo the MCU because he wants to get it out of Doom's control. I think that's so wild, but I absolutely love it. And I feel like we're going into a world now where we don't know what's going to happen, but I think that the nature of Kang being someone who is so many different people, so many different versions of a person, so many different iterations, that leans into the empathetic. That means there are versions of him who want to do the right thing. And so I think pitting him against Doom and them almost being kind of equals in power is very interesting and I think quite likely. So, I think that the way they do the quantum realm in the MCU is very similar. We've talked about this before, to the negative zone. So I think that there's a big chance that there's already been some kind of, if Kang has lived every life and every multiverse possible, he's probably already met Doom.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the thing that so when you reference God Emperor Doom, again, for those who don't know, this is the Doom that after the kind of collapse of all the multiverses, molded reality in the image that he wanted and basically controlled the universe for the period of time that is shown in the crossover event, the Secret Wars crossover event, the Hickman's version of the Secret Wars crossover event. I think it's too much of a all this didn't happen.
Yeah, it's too much of it was all a dream.
But it's also really, man, that would be incredible if they did it right. If it was, because like they've kind of gestured at least at the time runs out storyline and the kind of collapse of all the multiverses. We saw that in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and some other kind of like little snippets of imagery where you see like galaxies, this image of galaxies colliding.
And
incursions. Yeah, the actual usage of the term incursions, which sets up the time runs out storyline. I mean, that is kind of there. I wonder if we're gonna get incursions before we get Doom, or if we're gonna see Doom before we actually get incursions. I'm not sure they even know, but like that, there's a lot of pathways to get to Doom, and there's also to your point. Let's say they go young with the Fantastic Four casting. Do we see like a more down to earth? Just kind of not run of the mill, but a more standard comic book baddie Doom in his early evolution, post the scarring, post Reed Richards, from Doom's perspective, Reed's meddling in his experiments. He's got this, maybe they're both like tech bro guys, and Doom
that does seem like the easy way to go. I hope they do something a little bit different, but I do
hope that.
I think now that, in the much maligned Fan 4 stick, as we call it, because the logo had a 4 in the middle for some unknown reason, the most recent Fantastic Four movie, they did it that Doom was like a hacker, which actually was like kind of even felt dated then. That is the thing that gives me the biggest hope for them being slightly aged up, is because we've already seen the young Fantastic Four done, and it didn't necessarily coalesce in the way people would have wanted. Even though obviously like Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm is like icon level casting. But yeah, I'm very interested to see the route that they go. And I think that's the biggest question when it comes to casting is, are the Fantastic Four going to be aged up? They already exist. They've, a long time. This is what I was saying. I used to say it when I worked in the comic shop. I'm still saying it now. I had always wanted back then it was like Taika Waititi, and he's directing a 60s Fantastic Four movie where they get thrown into the future and it's a fish out of water story. Those rumors are now going around that might be what happens, in which case they already have to be established. And we do have the X-Men as the young heroes potentially coming into the MCU. But I still think, why wouldn't they want 20-year-olds so they can still be doing it in 20 years? That is really how long these franchises go on for. So I'm intrigued to see which way.
I kind of also think that, if we see some version of a Fantastic Four origin story, we might not see Doom until like the second Fantastic Four movie. It might be some version of scientists make an amazing discovery, a dimension that scientists are calling the negative zone has been contacted.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they open it up. Right. Then they open it up, and who comes out but Doom? And it's the Fantastic Four's job is to try and stop people from accessing the negative zone, but it's too late.
I just quickly say, I do think that's one of the most interesting things about Quantumania. I feel like within a month when we've seen it and we're talking about it, we're going to know a lot more, because what we've seen in the trailer is Cassie essentially creates a portal that opens up the quantum realm, and then that is a problem, which is a very negative zone storyline. Yes. So I think we'll really see how much of those analogies are purposeful, homages, coincidental, useful, or actually concrete kind of, the tagline for the new poster they released, for the Quantumania poster they released today said, I think it's like, welcome to a new dynasty. Obviously that makes us think of the Kang dynasty, but it could also be talking about the Richards. It could be many things. So it's very exciting times.
Well, let's get to Kang. Jasmine asks, do you think we'll see a version of Kang in Loki season 2, or will we just be teased with the whole season? I want more Jonathan Majors. She also asks, Secret Invasion question, what's your bets on the undercover Skrull reveals over under? Oh, wow, 2 good questions. Okay, first Kang. I think it's a good question. Is Jonathan Majors going to be too busy? It certainly makes sense that I think that there's a way to do it, and I think they gestured at it with, when Loki, steps out into whatever reality he's currently in, and he sees this huge statue of Kang. I think there's a way to do it in which Kang is this shadow that is like falling over the entire season without actually seeing him, and I kind of think that that's what they're going to do, and they will save Jonathan Majors for the movie. What are your thoughts?
I think basically almost exactly the same as you. I think you really hit the nail on the head. The only thing I will say I think is the wild card and the kind of hopeful bright light for us is who love Jonathan Majors is that the first season of Loki had that standout bottle episode that was really focused on Kang, and that really worked. It went down really well. People loved it. So maybe there's a potential that we get a kind of reflection of that where we get the shadow of Kang the whole time and then the one episode, and it might be in the middle because you're learning about this universe's version of Kang where he is Kang the Conqueror, or it might be at the end again. But I think there's potential for maybe an episode, but I don't think he's going to be our villain of the week, sadly, because I would love to see it.
What do you think about Jasmine's second question, Secret Invasion question?
So many people asked us about Skrulls, so I still think you're 100% right. Maria Hill.
100% a Skrull.
100%. She is a Skrull.
She's absolutely a Skrull.
We're just saying it.
Yeah.
If they don't do it, that's going to be like the best fake out ever. Other Skrulls. I think that it's quite likely that the Contessa Valentina de Allegra Fontaine is a Skrull.
I also like her for a Skrull. I worry that it would be a little bit of the same kind of beat if Maria Hill is also a Skrull. But I like her for that. I like her
Maybe
for a Skrull.
Maybe it's like you have if they're getting into every high part of the government and society. You have Val, who's now like the leading the CIA or something, and then you have Maria, who's trusted within SWORD. So they're kind of hitting both segments. Who's our big hero gonna be? I've always been the Jeremy Renner as a Skrull believer. I think they could use it to write out
Get well soon, Jeremy.
Oh yeah, get well soon. But who is, if you were going to pick one big hero that they wanted to say, oh, this person's been a Skrull for 5 years, who would it be?
Hank Pym.
Oh, that's a good one. And that could have big ramifications if they have easy access to the quantum realm.
I feel like there's going to be one... maybe not one, but like a 0.75 average of characters from each kind of group, like from Cosmic, from Spy Marvel, from Wakanda Marvel. So I think there'll be one in each. Like Wong? Wong would be shocking. Like, and I would not, it's not out of the question to me if Wong is a Skrull.
Also, so Bucky Barnes, I think, is like a solid choice. What I will say is, that the thing that's hard to comprehend, and I think this, once the Skrulls are in the MCU, people will understand it. It's hard to comprehend how much of a big deal it was when they were like, peace, they're all Skrulls.
Yeah, it was huge. It was a big deal.
And the reason it was huge is because their behavior, they'd been there for so long that you never knew. And that's actually because editorial decided to do it. There was no 7 years of seeding thinking that, oh, these people were Skrulls. But in the MCU, that's why I think it's so hard, because we have yet to really comprehend the fact that if a Skrull has been there, they will have learned all the patterns. They will have behaved. That's why you would believe. So it could be Wong. It could be Bucky. I'm gonna say that no Skrulls ever got into Wakanda. That was the rule in the comics, which was like, see Wakanda and die. That like great three issue run by Jason Aaron. So I'm gonna say Skrulls never made it to Wakanda, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have taken someone over outside of Wakanda and had them be a plant out in the world, So yeah, I think who is a Skrull was a big question that we got, and I think that's going to be very interesting to see how much we find out in Secret Invasion, because honestly, that's a TV show, but Marvel has not been afraid to drop big, shocking things within the world of TV.
This one is kind of cheating, because it's plucked from the comics. But as we saw at the end of Hawkeye, Linda Cardellini, aka Laura Barton, is Mockingbird, is the MCU non-ABC Shield version of Mockingbird, right? And Mockingbird's return to the comics after many, many years being dead was in Secret Invasion when we realized that they had kidnapped Bobby and taken her to fucking Skrull space, wherever, to hold her prisoner. And it works. It translates directly to TV. She's already worked in Hawkeye. I would not be shocked if Linda Cardellini is a Skrull.
That is a legit great call, yeah? Because, one, we all knew that Linda Cardellini was going to be made for bigger things than being Hawkeye's wife. Right. You don't cast her as Hawkeye's wife. And then we found out she's Mockingbird. I think her being a Skrull and then seeing the fallout of Hawkeye having to realize...
He's been sleeping next to a Skrull for
and not just that,
who knows how many years.
He's doing crazy missions in the Hawkeye TV show, putting his family at risk to get back this watch for a Skrull. For a Skrull. You know what? Okay, so my biggest hope for Skrulls is, Secret Invasion. It's great. The Super Skrull, that's like a whole other thing because we need to get into the Fantastic Four before we can see a Super Skrull. But my biggest wish is... will 3D Man be in Secret Invasion? Or will 3D Man be involved? In the comics, 3D Man, who is just the weirdest, classic, 70s Marvel character, first appeared in Marvel Premiere 35, created by Roy Thomas, who truly must be raking in the cash right now, because they are going through his back catalogue, and Jim Craig. And he has 3D glasses, right? Magical 3D glasses. But the way that they're used in especially Secret Invasion, but throughout the history of his comics with Skrulls, he can see who Skrulls are. And one of the coolest parts of Secret Invasion is he just walks into this room of heroes and he's like, they're fucking Skrulls! Yeah, what the fuck? And everyone's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, they're Skrulls. They're literally Skrulls. I would love to see him come into this Skrull storyline at some point because it's just such a fun character. But it will be interesting to see because I feel like Secret Invasion was so huge in the comics, and Feige keeps saying this is like an intimate spy thriller. So we don't know how much impact it's going to have, but yeah, I think those are great bets, and I think you're always great with these Skrull predictions. The Mockingbird, that's my new favorite, even above Maria Hill. I think that's a great one.
And you mentioned Bucky Barnes. We talked about Hank Pym, who's certainly not necessarily like a top line Avengers level,
but he does have powers.
He does have powers, and he's been very important to the evolution of the MCU, and has been running secret missions, since the 60s. But if there was one non-Bucky Barnes top level current living or dead, which would open the door to them coming back, living or dead, MCU character who is a Skrull, who do you think it could be?
Okay,
Bucky Barnes is a good guess. Barnes is a good guess. I like Bucky Barnes as a top level.
If you're saying living or dead, I think the cruelest and most likely, because the MCU loves him, I would say in my head, my choice would be Captain America Skrull. I think that's so interesting. But the reality, I think, is Tony Stark. The miraculous news of, oh my God, Tony Stark wasn't actually dead. He's actually been in cryostasis this whole time. And he comes back and he becomes this huge figure and this icon once again. But he's actually a Skrull. That's incredibly bleak and amazing. And would be very interesting because you could have some great storylines with the characters within the MCU, like Peter, who would just know for some reason. He just knows, or Pepper just knows. And you kind of have this war between wanting to imagine that he's back and not. And I'm sure that Robert is dreaming of a way to find himself back.
I mean, it would, just in terms of what we know about the Skrull's powers, the suits would work. It would read his DNA as Tony Stark. It would read his brainwaves as Tony Stark. You could do a thing where it's they took Tony to space, and then whatever Skrull took over Tony with the idea that, I'm going to, bring down humanity from the inside, study it. But then he falls in love with being a hero, and he does all the right things at the end of Endgame.
Maybe a Skrull was at Tony Stark's funeral. Okay, what about this one? This one's really out there. So one of my all-time favorite theories that I first remember the brilliant Joshua Yale at IGN. We were talking on like the Captain Marvel set visit. This is so long ago, about what became one of my ultimate favorite theories, which is the kid from Iron Man 3 who got to keep one of the suits becomes Iron Lad, right?
Yeah.
That's like the dream. So they're saying at the moment, I spoke to that kid. I interviewed him once for IGN, and he was just, that was his dream, was that he could get to play Iron Lad and kind of go through that role. That seems unlikely now because, you know, Kang is Iron Lad, is Kang. So it's like, would they cast a white person? Would Harley be the right choice? But what if that kid is the Skrull, and the Skrull who was at the funeral who gets the suit? Now that's what I'm talking about. Bring that kid back. Fake us out. Like, people thought that the whole point of that original Young Avengers, brilliant, you know, Jim Chung stuff, is you thought that they were all analogs for established characters, but they were actually secretly kind of nothing to do with them. And Iron Lad was, you know, revealed to be Kang. But I love this idea that they could fake us out by being like, oh, he's going to be Iron Lad. He's going to be this young new hero with this suit on. But really, he's a Skrull. So I'm like, that's my one. Bring back the kid from Iron Man 3 and he can be a Skrull. He was at Tony's funeral. Why was he there?
Yeah.
Nobody has seen him for a long time.
I have one more and then we'll move on. This is a tinfoil hat one.
We're doing it. We're tinfoil.
Yeah, we're doing it. Fuck it. But Matt Murdock.
Love it.
Daredevil. Here's the reason being this. First of all, new to the MCU, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a good inflection point to try something like that. Two, he, as we saw in She-Hulk, because of who he is, the skill set he has, the fact that he's a lawyer plugged into all these kind of like different superhero concerns, he can go take a meeting with the Avengers. He can go take a meeting with Doctor Strange. He can go take a meeting with whatever, you know, with the government. And he would would have access to a lot of information if the idea is like, you know, I can, and also would have contact with the Marvel underworld. So like, there would be that opportunity to kind of like, he'd be perfectly positioned in a kind of spy role if he indeed was a Skrull. I don't think that's going to be the case.
No, but I love that idea, and I will say that does link to one of your best predictions, which was that Kingpin is a Skrull, hence why he now has these 6 superpowers. I love that one. So I'm like, everyone in Daredevil is a Skrull. Everybody's a Skrull, baby. When Secret Invasion comes out, you guys are going to be sick of us saying the word Skrull. Because we're going to be scrolling.
I mean, to be honest with you, the only one that I am like 100% sure of is Maria Hill. And and honestly, like, I feel like Laura Barton is a Skrull too.
I feel like Laura Barton. Now I'm a Laura Barton.
Just because, like, in the comics, that's legitimately how they reintroduced Bobby Morris into continuity. It was like, oh, she actually didn't die. She was just in space with the Skrulls.
Yeah. So we're gonna move it on to the X-Men. It's time. One of our all-time favorite topics.
You know, we rarely talk about them.
I feel like we never get to talk about them.
Do it this way, yeah.
This is a really great question. Ryan asks, do you think Marvel would be better served introducing the X-Men slowly, one character at a time, like they introduced the Avengers, start with a standalone Beast movie, then introduce Jean Grey, slow play Wolverine, etc. I feel like everyone is always speculating how they'll introduce the X-Men instead of a slow, methodical universe building. Maybe after a Secret Wars reset? ? Well, guess what, Ryan? This is our number one favorite topic. How will they introduce the X-Men? Jason, how do you think they'll introduce the X-Men to the MCU?
Well, I think that they will do it. I think the slow play is happening now, right?
I do too. I agree.
We're seeing the slow play both with, you know, the reveals that happened in WandaVision, with the you know, various characters, Miss Marvel, who have been referred to actively as like having mutations or being mutants. We saw again in Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. And so I think that slow play is happening where we're already getting familiar with the idea that people are just born with powers for whatever reason, and it's due to mutation. And I think when it does come time for the X-Men, I think it'll happen all at once. I think we'll get them all at once. I do think the one outlier, and we've said this, we've both talked about this a million times, the one possible outlier being Wolverine, who you could see existing in MCU continuity right now and since like the 1920s or whatever, like it's the original super soldier program was involved this guy named Logan, who is like a Canadian mutant who they experimented on. This became Weapon X, and it was like an offshoot of super soldier, and he's been like either in cryostasis or they wiped his mind, and he's been running all kinds of secret missions. And I think when they do introduce the X-Men in a non-interdimensional way, much like the Eternals, it's going to be, and Wakanda and Namor and Talokan, it's going to be all at once. They've been hiding in plain sight. There's a school upstate. It's a school for gifted youngsters, but actually it's a school for superpowered beings. They haven't gotten involved in the various fights going on because they don't trust humanity. They can kind of see where this is going. They might have any number of characters who can actually see the future and are saying, listen, we're going towards a bad place. If you reveal yourself, we're already going towards a bad place. But if you actually reveal yourself during the Thanos, when the Thanos stuff is happening, whenever fight is happening, when the battle in New York is happening, if you reveal yourself, then we're going to get to that post-apocalyptic, genocidal time for the mutants a lot quicker. So don't reveal yourself. I think they basically are around right now and they're just hiding.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I think so too. I also think something that I've been thinking about a lot, I think you're 100% right. I think we've seen it with the kind of reversion of Kamala back to her original origin, which was that she was going to be a mutant. And this kind of hint, I mean, she lives in New Jersey. It would be so easy for her to go to a school that was kind of upstate to see the way things go down. I think you're 100% right. They're seeding it now. What I think is very interesting is the timing of, and look, these schedules shift, right? But what we know right now is that phase 5, kind of Secret Wars phase, this kind of, 2024 onwards situation. And they did a very interesting ad in, India that was like Cassie saying, "Where are we?" in Quantumania, and it was like phase 5.
Yeah.
So it's like we're there, right? But I think it's very interesting that Deadpool 3, which we know is going to include Logan, is coming out in 2024, which is going to be within this kind of Secret Wars phase. And I think that is very telling. We don't know what it means for Deadpool and Logan to be in the MCU. I've already positioned my theory that Deadpool's there to kill all the Fox characters and Logan's potentially helping him.
I fucking love it.
I
honestly hope that's what it is, because I absolutely love it.
I will write
I absolutely love it.
But phase 5 from now to kind of 2024, I think that is very interesting. And I think that we could see Deadpool and Wolverine as mutants, as potential members of a intergalactic multiversal X-Men team, so they understand that the X-Men already exist, even if it isn't public here. I think we could see that be a way that they start to really seed those words and characters and phrases, even if it's just a touch of it. And then I do believe that we would probably, with that movie coming out when it is supposed to come out, I believe we would probably see that version of Logan and Deadpool whenever the big Secret Wars kind of battle, at least in a cameo phase. Who will the other mutants be? When will we start to see, Storm, who I believe is kind of nowadays, that's your primary X-Men that you want to introduce first? I don't know. That's the thing that I find most interesting. My one big prediction that we've talked about before that I think is true is I think that post, this kind of multiverse phase, the multiverse saga, I think it's going to be the mutant saga.
I
Infinity Saga, Multiverse Saga, Mutant Saga. I think that is.
It just kind of makes. It also just kind of makes. It kind of makes the most sense in the sense in that this is the mutants in the MCU gives you access to like an untapped mine of stories. Yeah, obviously they've been around in the Foxverse, but you could do them again in a better, more streamlined, more MCU
and stuff
way
we
now.
Never got more locks. You
Yes,
know,
we
there's
never got
there's
Morlocks.
so many different kind of, we've seen so many characters, but you know, we've never had a definitive Bishop storyline. You know, one of the best mutants
Which,
in
of
the
course,
world.
people can't wait for Bishop.
Yeah, that's the, I want Bishop so badly. You know, I love
What a scum!
the,
I need that scumbag in my life.
right, I love the glimpse that we got in Days of Future Past, and I felt like there were things that were done there that were very interesting, but we didn't get to expand on them. So I mean, I think about all the different teams that we could see, all the different teams that we love that are now being brought back to life. Excalibur, New Mutants, like these teams that meant so much to us when we were kids. X Factor, you know, X Force. It's almost, I feel like that's the stage where these movies could step out of the MCU and it becomes an entirely different space.
Now, that puts us several years off, and I think that that's probably what it's going to be. I will also say that I think that in addition to all the kind of seedings that we've seen, you know, Namor, et cetera, like all the things that we just mentioned, I do think that, and we talked about this some weeks ago when we discussed AXE, the Judgment Day crossover event that just finished up in Marvel Comics, written by Kieran Gillen with art by a number of artists, including Valerio Schiti, that the Eternals, your Eternal favorites, do kind of give us the most currently existing straight line shot towards the X-Men, because you could just say, because, you know, in that crossover event, the Eternals, or a faction of the Eternals, are pitted against the mutants, because it turns out the mutants are actually, mutation is actually a form of a deviation. They're actually deviants by another name. In fact, deviants can take the Krakoan gates, telling you that genetically they are extremely similar. So I think that there's a world in which the Eternals, the mission of the Eternals, brings them into direct conflict with this thus far hidden sect of deviants that we can then can be then revealed to be mutants. I think that is kind of our most direct straight line shot towards mutants in an earlier time frame than kind of like after
I think
all
so
this
too,
stuff
especially
that's happening now.
The Krakoa stuff has been so popular and has really reignited the X Office in a way we haven't seen for a long time. So I wouldn't be surprised if as an old school, lifelong, like middle-aged almost at this point, like X-Men fan, it blows my mind to imagine that Krakoa wouldn't be too weird for them to put on screen. But
I feel that way.
Seems like the easiest, simplest, direct line to what we already have. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them start taking from that.
Well, it's the problem that we've talked about so many times before, which is that you can introduce them a million different ways, but the issue is the crux of the mutant drama is that the world does not accept them, does not accept their existence.
Feared, baby.
They're hated and feared, and there's been multiple very successful attempts at wiping them out as a race that have happened in Marvel Comics. And without that kind of drama and tragedy, you kind of don't have the mutants. You need the hated and feared. Now, again, I think they're seeding it again, as we saw with Damage Control and the prison that we visited during Miss Marvel. I think that's there. With Sword and the way they're kind of pivoting Sword to kind of study sentient computers, potentially giving us an entree to Sentinel, to the Sentinel programs. I think they're seeding all that stuff, but we need the hated and feared before the mutants. Like, I'm with you. They could certainly say, oh, here's Krakoa and here's all the mutants and they've been hiding here. But I think that it wouldn't have the same impact unless you get the MCU writ large to a place where people with powers are feared, and mutants in particular are hated, feared, despised, to the point where people would be just kind of okay with somebody going to try and wipe them out.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that front, and that's like the biggest conflict. Also, again, I know it gets like this every time one of the MCU movies come out. It's because we're like so excited about what the implications could be. But again, I think Quantumania could set us even closer to that path where if Kang or whoever gets out of Cassie's, quantum kind of teleportation conversation device that she created, which, by the way, somebody should have stopped her because that was a really stupid idea. But like that, opening that space to the quantum realm, introducing different kinds of powered characters who did not get their powers from military suits or military experiments or the accepted ways in the MCU who are more cosmic in power, who are more reminiscent of, say, a Thanos. I could definitely see a route where Kang comes to our universe in the role of a benefactor who wants to help but is treated as if he is a villain like Thanos, and that can stoke that fear and also create a conflict between Kang and his hopeful ally, Paul Rudd, who, by the way, I saw walking down the street in San Pedro this week, filming
reshoots happening
cheeky,
now.
Little cheeky additional photography in that same comic shop.
What do you think that means? Obviously, this is
very interesting.
Here's the thing: this is not uncommon, right?
No.
Reshoots are very, very common, particularly in these kind of franchise movies, both on the DC side and the Marvel side. But it is quite late in the game, and I don't know for a fact that this is the latest reshoots that we've seen. I guess Avengers,
the movie does
like
come
the
out
shawarma,
in like a month, so it's unusual.
Right. I guess like Avengers, the shawarma scene was kind of like quick and dirty and very close to release. But what do you think it means?
So the scene that I saw them shooting, because it was just in my neighborhood, I was just wandering around, and they were doing a shot of him going into the coffee shop, and we saw the same character actor. He was outside who was in the coffee shop. So maybe expanding on that scene, because I think people really liked it with the Spider-Man joke. Maybe it's an end sequence where he goes back and they thank him and they get his name right. That seemed like something that would make sense to me. Also, I did think the trailers, which looked amazing and completely wild and very Spy Kids, which is always a compliment in my opinion, I did think they were lacking on the traditional Ant-Man jokes. Ant-Man is very much the comedic kind of going back to phase one type movie. So I'll be very interested to see if maybe it was punch-ups. It was additional photography. They also were shooting in this very outrageous, like, classical restaurant that's kind of near, called J. Tranny's. I saw them shooting outside. So I'm very interested to see what that would be, because I don't believe we've seen anything in or around there. So, yeah, and it was, again, they were shooting San Pedro for San Francisco, so it's set. It's still there. It could have also just been easier to shoot here than going back to SF. But yeah, additional photography a month before the movie. I'm intrigued. There's a new trailer coming out tonight.
Intrigued.
So we shall see.